Welcome to the Savvy Author Show. I am your host, Claire Rose. I am so excited that you're here today for the very first episode of The Savvy Author. And you are likely here because you dream of being an author, or perhaps you are an author and you're needing a little more guidance, but you're just looking for some information, and that's what this show is all about. So join me each week as we talk about the different pieces that are involved in getting the book out of your head and onto the shelf successfully. Today I want to talk about what it means to be a savvy author. So savvy is just a word that I attach to a lot of things. To me means you're just smart about it, right? You're just making good decisions, good choices. You're just smart about it. But when I started thinking about what does that really mean? What does that mean to people? And it's about being strategic and intentional. That's what it is to be savvy. So you'll hear me say it probably more than once or twice throughout this show. Be strategic, be intentional, be savvy. Today, let's start by talking about the different steps or the different stages that it takes to be a savvy author. All right, let's start with just a breakdown of what that looks like. There really are several steps, but here's the basics. Analyzing, so creating the right book that you want. That takes planning from the get-go. And then, of course, brainstorming, which is just capturing your ideas for the book. And then blueprinting, which is the outlining the structure for the book. This is all preparatory for a really successful book. And then writing. Of course, putting words to paper has to happen. If you don't write the words, you're never going to get that book done. And then, of course, formatting, which is getting it ready to publish, because just because you've written it doesn't mean it's ready for the world to see. And then, of course, publishing. Understanding your options is really important. That's where you're going to protect yourself, protect the rights of your finished product, protect your written words. There's so much to know about the publishing field, the publishing world, but there's some basics that you just need to know to protect yourself, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. All right. Let's jump in and get started on the first one. It is analyzing. So analyze first. Before you do absolutely any other thing, you're going to start with some research. So you're going to look for books with similar topics to the book that you are considering writing. You're going to think about how your book is going to be different to that book or those books out there. You're likely not the only person who's going to be writing about that book or has ever written about that kind of topic. So how will yours stand out? And then understanding who your book is actually going to be for, figuring out your target audience. And then a call to action. Doesn't make any sense to write a book if there isn't a purpose for the book. What do you want this book to do when it's published? Right? Unless you're doing a memoir, which there's nothing against memoirs, I happen to specialize in helping people with books that are nonfiction, but business-based. We have done a couple memoirs in our day, and some children's books and some other things, because that comes with the publishing world. But I basically focus my energies on helping subject matter experts to get their book out to the world. It's super important for those people to have a call to action, have something that the book is intended to do. I have an example for you. So right here I have my last book, 8 Ways to Mind Your Own Business, that I co-authored with a lovely lady in the UK. She does a lot of mind work, and I worked on the tactical stuff for starting a business. So this is 8 Ways to Mind Your Own Business, Strategy and Mindset for the New Entrepreneur. So this book is 2 subject matter experts putting their thoughts into a book in a way to strategically help people to start or launch a brand new business. Or if you're in the fledgling stages of business and you're struggling, this is a great resource for you. So that That's what I mean by it having a specific purpose. So the call to action on this particular book is, hey, here's how you can start your new book, but if you need further guidance, here's where you can go to get that further guidance. So that's my example on that one. All right, let us move on. Okay, so the next step, after you've done your research and you've analyzed what your book is going to be about, analyze what those pieces look like, is the brainstorm and blueprint. Now you're going to notice that I put those two together. When on the list they were separate. It was actually two separate steps, but let me tell you why. These steps work best when they're done together. In fact, I even offer a master class for this process that is very collaborative and makes the process so much smoother. So this is about brainstorming, capturing all the ideas that are floating around in your head that are about your book, the ideas you have for your book. Then it's about organizing those ideas into topics that will make sense to your reader ultimately. And then creating an outline for your book. And of course, the industry, the publishing industry, calls this a book build, but I like the term blueprint because I like what a blueprint stands for, what a blueprint means. It's how you build something, right? If you think about building, say you're going to build a new home, you are going to have a blueprint that your contractor is going to follow. It's the plans, and this is no different when you're writing a book. It's the plans or the blueprint for getting the book done correctly. So if you think about all of the pieces, all the moving parts of your book, how in the world are you going to keep track of where you're at and what you're doing if you don't have a plan to follow? So the brainstorm and blueprint is a super important part of successfully publishing a book. I have people come to me with like stacks of sticky notes or stacks of notebooks. Here's my book. What do I do next? And that's what the brainstorm and blueprint process is all about, helping you make sense of all of those things and then putting it together in such a way that it's also going to make sense to your reader. No doubt you've had this experience, if you're a reader, where you purchased a book and you felt like as you were reading it, it was really all over the place. They jumped from topic to topic, or they talked about one thing and then they talked about something else, but there didn't really seem to be a related reason for them to talk about it. That is a book that's not been blueprinted properly. Your book build was poorly done because the person didn't think about the end reader and what it was going to look like or feel like, the experience for them on the other end. That's why I talk so much in my own business, and I'm going to talk on this show about the importance of brainstorming and blueprinting your book. Don't start writing a word until you have a good solid foundation to follow. Now, if you've already started writing, that's okay. Stop, pull out all of your books or notes or whatever you've started working on and just stop and do a brainstorm and blueprint process. Of course, if that sounds foreign to you or seems complicated, hop on over to clairerose.com and learn more about being part of the next masterclass, and we can do it together. All right, let's move on. All right, so once we have done our brainstorm and blueprint, now we can move on to the next step in the list, which is, you guessed it, writing. You must actually do the writing if the book will ever get done. Nothing replaces getting the writing done. This really is all about consistency and time, of course. And it's helpful if you set a schedule for writing when you won't be interrupted, it's outside of family time or your work responsibilities, so that it's actually on the schedule. Otherwise, you simply won't get to it. And then you're just going to follow the blueprint outline to get the work done. Now, I get asked this question a lot, so I'm going to address it. Feel free to write by hand or use a computer. Now, for some people, the act of writing by hand they just connect with that more. A lot of writers are that way. Like, I want to get it down on paper first, or I don't want to be sitting in front of the computer. I want to be on the lanai with a cup of coffee and my notepad, and that is completely fine. As long as you're following the blueprint that we've created or that you've created for the book, that's completely fine. It does, however, add another step. You guessed it, it has to be digital. Your editor is going to need it to be in a digital format for editing purposes. Gone are the days that an editor is going to do something by hand. They want it digital. It's quicker, it's easier, it just makes more sense. So if you've written it in tablets, totally fine. You're going to have to then type it into the computer, so you have it on a Word document or whatever you're using. Now, for some people, this is part of their process, so I encourage you to at least consider this. If you're going to write it on a tablet, as you transfer that into the computer onto a Word document, this is a good opportunity to do a first walkthrough on your editing. Editing is going to be an ongoing process. So write, and then edit. So you write with abandon, right? You write and write. Doesn't matter what you're saying, but if you, as long as you're editing. The back side of it is that you're editing. Edit. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit more about editing in a minute, but get your heinies in the seat and get the writing done. Now, more than one client over the years has struggled with this, and that's where having someone to work with makes a real difference. Someone who can help keep pulling you back to that outline, that blueprint, that book build, and holding you accountable for getting your writing actually done. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Formatting and editing. Now, on the original slide, I didn't show you editing, but you have to know that you need editing. Everyone needs an editor. Even editors have editors, because we often think that what we wrote is what we wrote, right? Or we often read what we think we wrote. That's confusing, isn't it? So we think we wrote what we thought, but we didn't. So I call it letting it cool, where you stick it to the side and you come back in a day or so and reread it. You'd be surprised at how many things you think you wrote, but you didn't. So that's why an editor makes such a huge difference. Some editors, of course, will format your book for publication as well, and some will not. So be sure to ask this question before hiring somebody for the formatting and the editing. If you're not getting it together in one package, your editor may well have a great referral for you, somebody that you can hire for the editing piece. They may have some sort of a partnership. It's always nice when the editor and the formatter either work closely together or they're the same person. It just makes things more cohesive, it seems. At least that's been my experience. And the truth is, a well-formatted and edited book will sell better. So hire a professional for this. Once your book is published, the world is going to judge you by errors and formatting issues. Now, I get a lot of books sent to me because as a literary consultant, I do a lot of edits, I do a lot of book reviews, I do a lot of helping people get published, so people will just randomly send me books. And one of the very first things that I do when I get a book is just open it up. Just open it up. Not start reading, but just open it up and flip through, and I'm looking at formatting. If it is poorly formatted, even just the very basics things like, you're probably not going to see it because it'll be all washed out, but that it's justified text, super important for the reader, for the comfort of the reader. Now, your reader might not recognize why it feels funky or it feels weird, but they're going to recognize that something looks wrong. So even just the basic formatting, super important. And then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to look at the table of contents. And if there isn't a table of contents, now this doesn't apply, of course, to fiction necessarily, but nonfiction should always have a table of contents. Helps you jump around in the book, know where you're going, let you go back and revisit things or ideas. Even in fiction, I love to have a table of contents. It tells me a little bit of something. So I look for that to see how well that is formatted. And then I just flip through randomly and look at some headings and how is their spacing? How is it easy to read? Does it look like it flows? And then I'm just going to stop here and there and I'm going to read paragraphs. And if I find in the few pages that I read, if I find spelling errors, I'm setting it aside. I'm probably not going to read the book. Now, that just could be because of the mass volume of books that I have people sending me. But to me, that says this person didn't have a formatter, didn't hire an editor, and then, of course, I always look to see if this is a self-published book. By the way, there's nothing wrong with self-publishing. Lots of people successfully self-publish. As long as you have somebody guiding you and helping you with that process, you can still have a great book in the end. But I always look at those things. So all of that said, if you're going to send me books, which I love to get books, make sure that it's just a good quality book that's going to represent you well, because I and the world are going to judge by errors and formatting issues. So I don't say that to be mean, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it matters, especially for the subject matter expert. Remember, I said the savvy author that I work with is usually a subject matter expert. Sometimes they're called a SME, and it's just somebody who's an expert in their field. When you put out a book and you're the expert, your credibility, your professionalism is all going to be judged on the only thing that they have to go off of, which is the book that you produce. So if you put out a crappy book, that's what they're going to think of you as a professional. Even if they don't consciously think it, in the back of their mind, they're going to be thinking, how professional is it? Can I give this person my money? Can I trust this person with whatever it is that they offer? Now, if you are a financial person, or you're any kind of a consultant, this is super important. You don't want to ruin your credibility by putting out a poor book. So just make good choices. Okay, let us move on. All right, let's talk about publishing. Now, publishing is such a big thing. There are so many options nowadays to publish. And understanding the publishing world and the options that are available to you these days will help you avoid costly mistakes and retain your creative control over your published works. So this is where the literary consultant makes such a huge difference. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times that I'm a literary consultant, so I just want to briefly tell you what that means versus a literary agent. So a literary agent is somebody who you would, if you had a finished product, you would reach out to, you would query them and say, hey, I have this book, or I have this book idea, but you would need to have at least a chapter or two to submit. Hey, I'm interested in you perhaps being my agent. The agent, if they like what they see and they think, oh, I can sell this book, it's not about you necessarily. I like this person. It's, can I sell this book to a publisher? They have relationships with the publishers, and they're going to pitch, if they take you on, they're going to pitch your book to publishers and try and get you a book deal. So they are the middleman who, between you and the publisher, that helps make sure all of the legal things are in place. Now, that being said, the publisher and the agent are getting a piece of your pie, and you are getting the smaller portion. That's just the way that it is in traditional publishing. Now, a literary consultant, which is what I do, while I have some relationships with publishers, my main focus is on the author. So I'm author-centric. So I work with authors to help them know what is good for them, to educate them about what's possible, what options they have, versus going traditional publishing. Now, for some people, traditional publishing makes great sense. In fact, I have one of my authors who we've done other projects, but one particular project, it made sense to go through a traditional publishing house. And so that's what she did. It made better sense, because for me, it's about what's good for my author, what makes the most sense for their bottom line, what makes the most sense for them. So we have other projects that we're doing together that we're going to hybrid publish. She could, of course, take those and self-publish. Nowadays, I wouldn't even venture to guess how many there are out there, but there is a lot of publishing companies out there for self-publishing. Sometimes it's called indie publishing. Sometimes it's called on demand. So the Amazons used to be CreateSpace, and now it's KDP, the Book Babies. Some of those out there will let you publish your book without judging the quality that the book is going to be. So you can write a book, and as long as it's formatted sufficiently that their online system will accept it, because it's automated, as long as the system will accept it, they'll publish the book. So if you're you don't really care what the quality of the book is, you can skip the step of the formatting and the editing and those kinds of things. And there are people out there who will publish on demand. There are also independent publishers out there that they'll publish anything that you're willing to pay them to publish. So they aren't concerned about the editing and the formatting, things of that nature. And we've already talked about why that's important. But those are the kinds of things that your literary consultant, whether you hired me or you hired someone else, is going to talk with you about your options. Self-publishing, indie publishing, hybrid publishing, which is really the best of both worlds, or traditional publishing, depending on the project that you're trying to put out there. Now, I'm going to give you a little piece of gold right now. So listen up. This is gold. Wherever you go, you want to own your own ISBN. Your ISBN is the number that is registered specifically to your book. Right? So if you look at any book in a bookstore, there's a number. It's also going to be in the front of the book under the publishing gobbledygook. It's going to have the ISBN number right there. And that number tells the system who wrote the book, when it was published, all the details, pertinent details about that particular book. And it's unique to that book. You want to own that number yourself. Now, if you are going with a traditional publisher, they don't allow that. So that's the exception to the rule. They exclusively own the rights to publish your book. They're giving you a contract. It says so in their contract that they exclusively own the rights, unless somewhere in the contract it specifically says at this date, at this time, we no longer own the rights, you own them. If it doesn't say that, they own it forever. You can't go somewhere else with your book and publish it. If you go with a hybrid publisher, an indie publisher, or do it self-publishing, just be sure and own your own ISBN. A lot of the on-demand publishers are going to offer you a free ISBN because they're not free. I think it's like $125, so not expensive, but they'll offer it to you for free. And some first-time newbie authors will think, oh, wonderful, a freebie. But now you don't own the exclusive rights to publish your book wherever you'd like. So that's my tip of the day, the little piece of gold that you get because you showed up today. Own your own ISBN. All right, we're almost done. So let's just recap really quickly. The savvy author is successful because they are strategic and intentional about each book project, from idea to publication and beyond. So be strategic, be intentional, be savvy. Let's go over the pieces one more time. We're starting by analyzing, right? Spending the time analyzing what your book project should be, target audience, who you're writing for is super important, who your competitors are, what other books you're going to be up against in the world, how you're going to be indifferent from them, super important. And then, of course, brainstorming your book, getting all of that stuff out of your head, or all those sticky notes or notebooks, wherever you've been keeping ideas for your book, pulling that all together, getting it in a format that you can do something with it. I recommend digital, that's just me, and then blueprinting it, getting it laid out in a way that when a reader reads the book, it's going to make sense to them, right? We start at the beginning and we end at the end, and everybody understands what they just learned. And then, of course, writing. Getting your hiney in the seat and getting the writing done. I am not a morning person, so I don't write well in the morning, but I know some of my authors will get up at like 5 a.m. so they have a good solid hour or so to write before the family gets up or before they head off to work. Some people are night owls. I have one lady who stays up to 2 or 3 in the morning and she writes then because the house is quiet, and so that works well for her. So figure out what it is that works well for you, because if you don't write, the book will never get published. What you have to say to the world is never going to get out there into the world to make a difference. We all have a message. We all have something to say. So getting it out of you onto paper is going to be so important to getting it published. Okay, and then of course we talked about formatting, which I included the editing in the formatting, because if you don't edit, yikes. If you need help with that piece as you go, look for a developmental editor. Developmental editing just means there's somebody who's going to help you stick to your outline and help you with each of the chapters as you go. So that's a process that I do in my business. So my authors will send me over a chapter. I will developmentally edit it, make sure the grammar's correct, spelling's correct, actually start to format it, get it ready for publication, and make sure you stick to the outline. So look for an editor that does that for you. Often a literary consultant will do that for you. Not always, so just double check. Be sure you ask questions. Okay, so formatting, good editing, and then be sure to work with somebody who can help guide you through navigating the waters of publishing, especially if you're going to self-publish. Right? There's lots of little things you're going to need to know to protect yourself. Super important that you have someone to guide you along the way, at least for the first book project, maybe the first two. Anyway, okay, there it is. There's a recap of all of the things that we're going to be talking about each week on the Savvy Author Show. I'm just so pleased that you are here today for the very first episode, and I'm excited to invite you back every Friday at 2, same time, same place, where you can learn more about being a savvy author. So whether this is your very first time of thinking about being an author, or you maybe have a few books out there that haven't done very well, maybe there's a reason, maybe a little guidance to get you on the right road. Or if you've previously published a book that either you self-published, but you own the rights to republish, or maybe you have a small publisher that went out of business. We've had that happen a number of times. Those are things that we can help you with as well. So we'll pull it back in, remix it, make it beautiful, put it back out to the world, and get it doing what you really want it to do, which is sell and make a difference for your end reader. Okay, so there you have it. Thank you once again for being here. Thank you so much to Tampa Bay Multimedia and WeBeam TV, which is where we tape each week, for making this show possible. Thank you to Rosedale Publishing, which is our press mark. And I'm thirsty, so I have water. Thank you to them for helping to sponsor the show. And thank you, of course, to you, my viewers, for showing up and being supportive each week. Drop me a line at hello@clairerose.com if you'd like to learn something specific. Otherwise, I will see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.